Bak Ha village lies nestled between ancient forests, where the sound of the wind blowing through the old trees can never be clearly heard. The entire area is one that no one dares to visit at night. And there is a reason for this eerie silence. The abandoned house in the forest, left years ago, has always been the subject of eerie tales. That morning, the Hoang family arrived at a small coffee shop in the village, where the strange stories about the house were always whispered by the locals to anyone who came close. Hoang, a middle-aged man, stood at the counter, casually ordering a cup of black coffee. His wife, Tu Lan, beside him, kept glancing around with curiosity, as if they were looking for a fresh start in life. The family had left the city, hoping to find a quiet place to settle down. They had just bought an old house in the middle of the forest, not far from the village, and planned to begin a new life in that peaceful place. When an elderly man, his face marked with deep wrinkles and eyes heavy with age, slowly walked in, the atmosphere suddenly grew still. He looked at Hoang and gently spoke. "Did you buy the house in the forest?" Hoang nodded, feeling uneasy for some reason under the man's gaze. "That house is not meant for anyone," the old man continued, his voice lowering. "The whole village knows about the things that happened there. They say there's a spirit, the spirit of a little girl who died a long time ago. She was very mischievous, but not the kind of mischief anyone could tolerate." Tu Lan smiled, surprised by the man's words. "We don't believe in ghosts, sir. We just want a quiet place to live. No one believes in ghosts until they see one." The old man chuckled softly, then turned and walked away, leaving behind a chilling atmosphere. Not because of winter, but because of something unseen. The Hoang family didn't pay much attention to the warning. They had made their decision, and the folk tales could not frighten them. They continued driving along the trail towards the abandoned house in the forest. When they arrived, Hoang and Tu Lan looked at the house carefully. The old house seemed like it had been abandoned for a long time. The paint on the walls had faded, the windows were shattered, and the roof tiles had become covered in moss. The garden around the house was overrun with weeds. "It looks like something out of a fairy tale," Tu Lan said, though her voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "We'll fix it all up," Hoang replied, trying to keep things light. "This will be our home, where we start a new life." Their two children, Min and Mai, happily ran around, playing in the overgrown garden. The whole family entered the house, and the first feeling that struck them was the eerie silence. Everything around them was so quiet that every footstep seemed to echo clearly. The first night, on the first evening, as dinner was served on the table, there was still something strange in the air. The children sat eating, but kept glancing around, their eyes widening every time a small noise came from somewhere in the house. Especially Min, the 10-year-old boy, couldn't stop staring toward the dark hallway in the back. "What are you looking at?" Tu Lan asked, her eyes following Min's gaze. "I saw someone standing there," Min replied softly. "It's just the shadows." Hoang smiled, got up, and pulled Min closer. "There's no one there, son." But when the whole family gathered near the fireplace, the clear, innocent laughter of a child echoed from afar. Silence fell over the room. Min looked around, his eyes wide open. "I'm not joking, Mom," Min whispered, his voice filled with worry. Tu Lan and Hoang exchanged glances, but assumed it was just the wind or some kind of misunderstanding. They continued their meal, but each of them carried an indescribable feeling inside. The second day. On the second day in the abandoned house, Hoang's family began to adapt to their new life. The parents were busy cleaning, rearranging the furniture, and starting to plan renovations. Meanwhile, Min and Mai, the innocent children, enjoyed the spaciousness of the house, exploring the dark corners and the abandoned rooms no one dared to enter. Min accidentally discovered a small door hidden behind a wall in the living room. It was an old wooden door, unlocked but cleverly concealed, as if someone had deliberately tried to keep it hidden. Curious, the boy looked inside, the dim light from the oil lamp casting a faint glow on a dark hallway. "There's definitely no one here," Mai said, her eyes following him. "But, are we playing hide and seek now?" Min didn't answer. He simply pushed the door open and stepped into the narrow hallway. The hallway was so dark that Min could only see a few steps ahead. He walked slowly, a growing sense of unease creeping up inside him. It felt like someone was watching him from behind. But when he turned around, there was nothing, only the silent, lingering shadows. Suddenly, a sharp, high-pitched laugh echoed from up ahead. Min jumped, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. He couldn't understand why a child's laughter would ring out in such a silent, empty place. Still, he kept walking forward, though his heart was filled with dread. The laughter didn't stop, it grew louder, closer. Suddenly, Min felt an icy cold hand touch his shoulder. He spun around, but there was no one there. No figure, no shadow, just a thick, suffocating silence. It was at that moment he realized he was the one being watched. "My mom," Min cried out, panicked, running back toward the door. But just as he neared it, the door slammed shut with a loud bang, as if held shut by an invisible force. When Min finally escaped the hallway, he returned to the living room and saw Mai holding an old toy wheel in her hands. "I found this under the cabinet," Mai said, her eyes shining with excitement. Min looked at the wheel and felt an immediate sense of unease. It wasn't something that belonged to their family. He glanced around, a strange feeling creeping into the room. Something foreign, something that didn't belong here was present, right here. "In this house. Let me take that to Mom," Min said, his voice uneasy. But Mai didn't seem to hear him. She simply smiled, as if the toy wheel held some strange power over her. By evening, as the family was preparing dinner, they realized the toy wheel had disappeared. No one knew who had taken it, or where it had gone. They sat around the dinner table, but the heavy, uneasy atmosphere made it hard to focus. Strange objects kept disappearing and reappearing without explanation. As night fell, the Hoang family tried to settle into their new routines, but that night, no one could sleep peacefully. Min and Mai were lying in bed when they suddenly heard soft footsteps echoing through the hallway outside their room. Both of them bolted upright, their eyes wide with fear. Min could feel it clearly now. Something was walking just beyond their door. "Lin," Mai whispered, as if calling out to someone. Min said nothing. He quietly got out of bed and tiptoed to the door. As he opened it, a cold breeze swept across his face. The darkness was thick, and right in the middle of the hallway, a faint white figure floated by like a thin cloud. It stopped in the middle of the hallway, then slowly turned to look at Min. A smile appeared on its lips, but it wasn't the smile of an ordinary child. The figure's eyes glowed like two dim lanterns, and Min found himself unable to look away. "Lin, that's your name, isn't it?" Min whispered, as if he had realized something. The figure drifted past him and vanished into the icy air, leaving behind a strange scent, wild and floral, like untamed flowers. The next day, the Hoang family continued working on fixing up the house. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. Objects kept moving on their own. Things in the kitchen, bowls, plates, utensils, were found in different places with no explanation. One night, while Hoang and Tu Lan were talking in the living room, they once again heard laughter. This time, it came from a room they had never entered. Hoang stood up, picked up the oil lamp, and walked toward that room. But when he opened the door, it was empty. The door slammed shut behind him, and the flame of the oil lamp suddenly dimmed, as if something, or someone, was sucking all the light from the room. After 3 days in the abandoned house, the Hoang family began to sense a distinct change in the atmosphere. The strange events, though not terrifying enough to make them flee, left behind a growing chill of unease. Min and Mai no longer ran happily through the house. Instead, they grew quiet, their eyes always filled with worry. Hoang and Tu Lan tried to ignore the odd noises, but they could no longer deny that this house was not the safe place they had imagined. One evening, as the whole family sat together in the living room, a sudden noise echoed from upstairs. Heavy footsteps and the creaking of rotting wood under weight made everyone look up. "There's definitely someone up there," Hoang said, uncertainty in his voice. He stood, picked up the oil lamp, and began to climb the stairs. Tu Lan watched him go, worry etched on her face. "Be careful," she called out, but Hoang didn't hear her warning. He had already reached the upper floor. Walking down the shadowy hallway, the air around him seemed to grow heavier with each step, the darkness thickening, as if something unseen was watching him. Even the air itself felt dense with unease. At the end of the hallway, the oil lamp's light began to dim. Only a faint glow remained, barely enough to light up the worn wooden floor. In that dim light, he saw a door, one that hadn't been there before. Hoang stepped closer and reached for the handle. But just as he touched it, the door suddenly burst open, forcing him to stumble back. A freezing gust of wind hit him in the face, so cold it felt like his skin was being frozen numb. A hazy figure stood silently in the center of the room. It was the shape of a child, with long, tangled hair, a pale face, and deep, black eyes that looked like bottomless pits. It was the spirit of a girl, one Hoang had only heard about in stories from the villagers. The spirit stared at him, wordless, but her eyes, those endless black eyes, made him feel as if he were being pulled into them. Unable to escape, suddenly, laughter echoed through the room, rising and falling, as if a group of children were playing together, yet the sound was laced with a chilling, unnatural tone. Panicked, Hoang turned and ran, but just as he reached the hallway, the door behind him slammed shut. He looked back only to see darkness swallowing the room whole. That night, the Hoang family once again tried to sleep in the house, though each of them felt the same unexplainable presence. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. As if something had shattered, Hoang and Tu Lan jumped to their feet. But when they reached the lower floor, the house had changed. The living room no longer looked the same. The furniture had been rearranged. The painting on the wall had vanished. In its place was a strange photograph of a pale girl with deep black eyes, standing alone in a desolate garden. "This can't be," Tu Lan whispered, her voice caught in her throat. Just then, the window flung open, and a cold wind swept in, carrying with it a strange sound, like the whispers of spirits echoing throughout the house. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from upstairs. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, resounded across the floor above, as if someone was walking around the room. Hoang stood up and made his way upstairs. But as he ascended, everything went silent. When he reached the room, it was as if nothing had happened. Silence returned, as though the house had swallowed all sound. Only the faint glow of the oil lamp flickered, casting light onto the empty bed. But just as he turned to leave, a soft whisper drifted through the room. "You can't leave?" Hoang turned back, but saw nothing. Only a pair of eyes, dark, bottomless eyes, stared at him from the shadows. They glowed faintly, like twin lanterns in the night. Then, the eyes began to move. They blinked slowly, then suddenly appeared on the empty bed. Hoang froze, unable to look away. Then, a freezing hand touched his shoulder. He spun around, but no one was there. He could feel it. Someone was right next to him, but invisible, a ghost without a form. Hoang bolted down the stairs, gasping for breath. He couldn't make sense of what was happening, but it felt like something was toying with him. As he entered the living room, he heard laughter, light and mischievous, but unnervingly eerie, the kind of laughter that mocked desperation. Tu Lan looked at him, eyes wide, her face pale. "Did you hear it? That laugh, that laugh?" Hoang nodded, though he wasn't sure anymore. This time, the laughter didn't come from any direction. It felt like it was coming from inside them, from within. At that moment, Min and Mai ran into the room, their faces pale with fear. "We have to go. We need to leave right now," Min cried out. But again, the laughter echoed, closer this time, as if someone were standing right in front of them. Then suddenly, a small figure, faint and ghostly, appeared right in the middle of the room. It was a child, with long hair hanging down and a pale, lifeless face. Her eyes were black, like endless voids. A strange smile crept across her face. Her eyes were no longer hollow, but glowing coldly, filled with a cruel gleam. A piercing, shrill laugh rang out, unbearable to everyone in the room. "Run!" Tu Lan screamed, but as she turned around, the girl's shadowy figure appeared right in front of them. The entire family bolted from the living room, running down the dark hallway. but they couldn't find a way out. It was as if they were trapped in a maze with no exit. Behind them, they could feel something, or someone, chasing. Suddenly, a loud banging echoed from above. Hoang looked up, and his eyes widened in horror. From the ceiling, a black hand, cold as death itself, was reaching down. It slowly moved, brushing against Hoang's head. Every time it touched his skin, it sent a sharp, icy pain through his body. But as he reached up to grab it, the hand vanished into thin air. "That spirit, it doesn't want us to leave," Hoang whispered, his voice breaking. In that moment, darkness swallowed the entire house. The family could see nothing but the spirit's black eyes glowing in the shadows. And the child's laughter echoing endlessly, mocking, taunting, challenging them. The next morning, faint sunlight seeped through the shattered window, adding a heavy stillness to the haunted house. Cracks lined the walls. The shadows seemed to cling to the corners, refusing to leave. The Hoang family was exhausted, drained after a sleepless night. They knew that if they didn't do something soon, the house would become a never-ending nightmare. Finally, they sought out a Feng Shui master they had heard whispers about, someone rumored to be able to handle strange spiritual occurrences. His name was Mr. Hung, a well-known Feng Shui master in the region. He appeared at their doorstep that morning, dressed in traditional garments, his face etched with deep contemplation and solemnity. His eyes were sharp as blades, as though they could see through everything hidden within the house. As soon as he stepped across the threshold, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier than ever. A chilling, menacing sensation swept through the room, making Tu Lan and Hoang shudder. Mr. Hung glanced slowly around the living room before softly speaking. "This house is haunted. A dark spirit refuses to leave. Not only that, it carries a deep grudge. You cannot stay here much longer, or things will get far worse." Tu Lan and Hoang looked at each other. They had no choice but to believe what Mr. Hung said. The entire family had been living in fear, and they needed to act immediately. Though they didn't fully understand the spiritual rituals, they knew this might be their only chance to escape the nightmare. Mr. Hung instructed the family to prepare a few items for the ritual: an old bronze bell, 3 white candles, a long red thread, and a small altar. All of these were arranged in the center of the living room, the place Mr. Hung claimed to be the heart of the malevolent energy. As the ritual began, an eerie silence fell over the house. Mr. Hung lit the white candles and started drawing a strange circle on the floor using golden powder. The markings formed a large ring around the altar, serving as a protective boundary against the dark forces. The family stood quietly, the only sound being Mr. Hung's voice, low and steady, like the whisper of wind through trees. He began chanting incantations. The hoarse, powerful words echoed through the still air, sending waves of icy cold throughout the house. Each phrase seemed to sink into the atmosphere, as if awakening something buried deep within the house itself. Suddenly, a cold, eerie laugh echoed from the end of the hallway. Though it was faint, it carried a haunting tone, like a child mocking their desperate efforts. Min and Mai, the children, huddled close to their mother, too afraid to look toward the sound. Tu Lan held her children tightly, her hands trembling, but her eyes stayed fixed on Mr. Hung. The candle flames began to dim, as if being consumed by an invisible force. Darkness crept slowly through the house, leaving only the vague outlines of the golden circle on the floor. That ghostly laughter continued, growing clearer and closer, tightening the air with dread. Hoang felt something was wrong, a deep, gnawing sense of unease. The feeling of being watched became increasingly evident, as if a pair of invisible eyes were staring at them from within the darkness. "We can't let it win," Mr. Hung whispered, his eyes firm with resolve. "This spirit will have no place to exist any longer." Just as he finished speaking, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing all the candles and plunging the space into a chilling darkness. The house began to tremble, as if it were writhing in anger. Out of the shadows, a faint figure slowly appeared, a child with long, drooping hair, a pale face, and eyes as black as an abyss. It stood motionless, its eyes glowing eerily as it stared at Hoang's family. The ghostly laughter echoed again, louder and clearer this time. The child slowly stepped toward them, each step trailing a wave of bone-chilling cold. The children in Hoang's family began to panic, and Tu Lan was too frozen with fear to utter a word. The house had transformed into an entirely different realm, a world of darkness and fear. Mr. Hung stepped forward, raising the ancient bronze bell high. "Begone, evil spirit," he shouted, his voice sharp like the shattering of ice. With his cry, a powerful burst of light erupted from his hand. The child's spirit recoiled, its eyes rolling back in fury. A horrific roar rang out. But then a surge of brilliant light engulfed the apparition. The child let out a piercing, ear-splitting scream, and then slowly faded, vanishing without a trace. As soon as the spirit disappeared, the house fell into silence. The laughter, the strange noises, all were gone. The air felt lighter, though a lingering gloom still hung in the atmosphere. The family stood still, not daring to move, as if any slight motion might shatter the fragile stillness. Mr. Hung lowered the bell and let out a long sigh. "The spirit has been banished. But you must stay vigilant. Evil never gives up so easily." Though the ritual was over, Hoang's family could feel that the silence might only be temporary. The house still held secrets left unanswered. Had the spirit truly gone? Or was it merely waiting for the right moment to return? The fear remained, smoldering quietly within each of them. But at least now, they knew that not all hope was lost. They could keep living, though the ghosts of the past would still cling to them, waiting for the right moment to return. The next day, Feng Shui Master Hung returned to the house. He sensed a change in the air, a strange shift. As if a dark force still clung stubbornly to the place. He looked at Tu Lan and Hoang with worried eyes. "The spirit hasn't left. It's still very strong," Mr. Hung said, his voice low. "This evil won't be defeated so easily. And it won't rest quietly." Tu Lan and Hoang were surprised. But they had no choice but to trust him. Mr. Hung continued, "We must continue the battle. This time, I'll use a more powerful method, but it will be dangerous. You need to prepare yourselves." Soon after, the necessary items were laid out: a large bronze bell, a piece of red cloth, several white candles, and a long spool of red thread. These items would form a protective circle for the final ritual, a ritual that could banish the spirit for good. Mr. Hung began the preparations, carefully clearing the space to create a sacred environment. His chants echoed through the air, as if piercing the very walls of the house. But suddenly, a faint laugh sounded from a dark corner, making the whole family shudder. It was a cold, merciless laugh, as if the child's spirit was mocking them. Mr. Hung closed his eyes, biting his lip. "This spirit cannot be allowed to exist any longer. I won't let it destroy you." Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the hallway, and the surrounding darkness grew even thicker. The candlelight flared brightly for a moment, then died out completely, as if something unseen was draining their energy. This time, the child's spirit didn't just appear, it manifested as a monstrous figure. With a gaunt, twisted body and eyes glowing like twin flames. It stood right in front of Mr. Hung, and in those burning eyes was pure hatred, a deep, seething vengeance. A powerful gust of wind surged from the spirit, sweeping through the room, sending objects flying and making the very walls seem on the verge of collapse. The spirit began advancing toward Mr. Hung, growling low in its throat. Its scream echoed through every crack in the house, spreading to every dark corner. Mr. Hung did not back down. Instead, he stretched out his hand and chanted with more power than ever before. But the malevolent spirit was not so easily subdued. It swung its arm, unleashing a wave of dark energy that struck Mr. Hung directly, causing him to stagger and nearly fall. Still, the Feng Shui master would not allow himself to fail. He raised his arm, and from his hand burst a blinding beam of light that collided with the evil spirit. The whole space trembled, the wind howled violently, as if everything was being torn apart. Walls cracked and shattered, candles flared with fierce intensity. The malevolent spirit let out a chilling shriek, trying to resist Mr. Hung's power. But its form grew increasingly faint, as if being gradually eroded by the radiant light. Every time it tried to strike back, Mr. Hung responded with another incantation, surrounding himself with an even stronger shield of protection. The battle raged on relentlessly, the very air seeming to shatter around them as bolts of light flashed like the end of the world was near. Mr. Hung and the dark spirit wrestled in a life-or-death struggle, a clash between light and shadow. At last, Mr. Hung stood firm, the light from his hand burning even brighter. With one final, forceful motion, the Feng Shui master shouted, reciting a final incantation. It was like a blow struck against the very fabric of space. The evil spirit was pulled into the protective circle. It screamed a piercing wail, then slowly dissolved into the air. All that remained was a surge of light radiating throughout the house. The moment the spirit vanished, silence returned to the house. The Hoang family stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the Feng Shui master. The howls, the ghostly laughter, all gone. The house fell still, and the oppressive, eerie chill had disappeared. Master Hung exhaled deeply, his eyes weary yet unwavering. That spirit can no longer exist. This house has been returned to peace. The Hoang family could hardly believe what they had just witnessed, a battle with an invisible force. Beyond anything they could have imagined. They knew now that the house was finally freed, though evil never gives up so easily. Still, they felt relief. At the very least, for now, they could sleep in peace.